Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah with the Midwest Writing Center, and today we are having one of those episodes where I interview somebody doing something cool in the arts. On the alternate video days, I'll give some kind of short educational talk on something literary, but you're in for the conversational treat today. After I do the introduction, we'll have our conversation, and that will be followed by a writing prompt and a nice goodbye message. Today, I am super excited to welcome Sandra Marchetti, who is the 2023 winner of the Twin Bill Book Prize for Best Baseball Poetry Book of the Year. Wait, I have it. It's called IL 228. Seems like a really niche award, but we'll get to that later. It's pretty great. Um, Sandra is the author of three full-length collections of poetry: Diorama from Stephen F. Austin State University Press. That one is pretty new, so we will give you more info on that. IL 228 from SF, SF, I can't say F, SFASUP, and Confluence from Sundress. Sandy is also the author of four chapbooks of poetry and lyric essays, one of which, no big deal, was published by MWC Press. So, yeah, we were here before she was famous because we're amazing. Her poetry appears widely in Poet Lore, Blackbird, Ecotone, Southwest Review, Subtropics, and elsewhere. Sandra's essays can be found at The Rumpus, Whiskey Island, Mid-American Review, Barrel House. I will never say this word correctly, Pleiades, and other venues. She's poetry editor emerita at River Styx, which is a killer magazine. Sandy earned an MFA in creative writing poetry from George Mason and now serves as the assistant director of academic support at Harper College in Chicagoland. Thanks for hanging out today.
I'm so glad to be here. It's incredible to be here. I think about when Midwest Writing Center published this book and I was a young 20 something. And God, how times have changed. It's fun to be back.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so excited. So here's how we met. We met at an event that was a reading collaboration that Sandra headlined with Iowa City Poetry and Porchlight Literary Arts Center in the summer. In the summer,
Yeah, it was
maybe
something.
late summer, early summer. It was summertime.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I must have said something about the writing center, and she was like, "Yeah, no, I have a book with you." And I was like, "This is the best moment of my life."
It
Um,
was amazing.
yeah, that makes me so happy. And I went home and I think probably all of our books. I consider it like part of my job to know what we publish. And I went home and I was like, "Let's go."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this has been on my mind since then, and I'm really, really pumped to be able to do this. That was a really good reading.
Oh, thank you.
Um, anyway, back to the questions. We'll get on to the topic of you. This is probably I've phrased it carefully, so it's a little less daunting, but it's probably the hardest question I will really ever ask. How did you come to writing?
That is a hard question, and I feel like every time I answer it, I maybe give a little different answer, which is maybe the right thing to do because you remember something new and everything else. Um, I think for me, I was a creative kid. I was an only child. I lived in, um, I had all those only child tendencies. I loved being alone. I daydreamed a lot. But I was really a talker. Like I would talk to myself, I would talk to anybody who would listen. And so for me, like I think part of the link for me to poetry is that I really see it as an oral art form. Like I think the page is an important part of it. I'm not a slam poet, but I really believe poetry is meant to be read out loud. It's or even many of my poems are memorized, like I've memorized them, which isn't really in vogue, but that's just kind of the way it is. And so
Anytime I see a poet perform like without reading from the page, or I suppose memorize their work, I'm so astounded because it's first, it's only poets. I've never, I don't know, it'd be weird if somebody was
I
just like
don't think, yes.
performing a novel, but I'm just like, how? For some reason, I'm less astounded when it's an actor, which is
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's very hard. I think acting has got to be more difficult because you didn't write it. Like, I mean,
Right.
I've like suffered over these poems for months and years and millions of revisions. So that's why, you know, that's why I've got it. But I would say as a kid, I was verbal and I loved art and I loved writing things and I loved drawing and all these sorts of things and, you know, fashion design and hair and all this stuff. And then I think like for me, I did, you know, there were times when I was in high school where I really thought, you know, maybe I would be a visual artist. But I think for me, writing was more of a natural pathway. Like I felt the need to use words to explain things or describe things or whatever, and I was naturally more gifted with words. So, and then you know, poetry itself, like I find now that when I read things that are too long, like I'm not obviously not Gen Z because I'm joking about a book that I published 15 years ago and being in my 20s, but I um I have a really short attention span for like it's difficult for me to read long things, like even a long short story if it's over 20 pages. I'm like I don't like reading long poems. I really
It
like
doesn't get to be called a short story anymore after that. We need
yeah,
another word for it.
yeah, right. Like yeah, there's got to be something between that and a novella. But I think for me, like I love the challenge of working with the economy of language and the sound. And so that's why I'm writing poetry. Although I do write lots of I do write lots of essays. I've written some short stories, but I would say my essays are also really lyrical though. Like so they still have some of those qualities, but a lot more words.
I think, and I've said this 1,000 times, but man, when poets write prose, they just they ruin the game for all the prose writers.
We're really bad though with things like plot. Like we don't know what that is. Like we're good at writing like essays or fiction that is like an Italian film. Like but it doesn't have a plot. Like there's nothing there. Um so but yes, we love to describe things. We love to create settings. So we love that. So yeah.
Do you are your prose pieces pretty short?
I did actually take on the challenge like a fellow writer who was a poet who turned into a fiction writer and has like actually had great success like publishing with like big five publishers in fiction. He was like, you should write a short story. And I wrote one and it took me like 20 pages to get everything out. And I was like, I never thought I would be this person. I had an idea for a plot and it took me 20 pages to get through it because I'm still a poet and I wanted to describe everything and I
Mhm.
wanted to like use have all these like little cutaway scenes and I was really proud of myself. Like it took me a couple years to write that short story and like another couple of years to get it published, and I was like, actually I'm just going to brag on myself because it's fiction and that's not my area of expertise. It got a pushcart nomination and I was like, normally
Nice.
I wouldn't really care that much about a pushcart nomination for like a poem, but I was like, yes, everyone will be hearing about this.
Do we get to hear who the writer was who encouraged that?
Yeah, his name was Mark Wisniewski. I think he goes by Mark Wish now.
Fun. Um, that's awesome. I mean, I would be excited about knowing who the person was if you hadn't said that they had, you know, a name. Because I think I don't know, our literary lineage is fun and worth knowing, right?
For sure.
And that includes our friends, not
Yeah,
just
yeah,
parents.
yeah.
You get it.
Yeah. Influences.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but that's interesting. My thinking on that when you said that like the attention span thing was like my this is a terrible, terrible compliment that I've received many times, which is that my essays are brief. It's nice how short it was. Were you excited for it to end? Did you have a bad time? Can you say something that's definitely nice?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's
um,
tough.
but
I've
I
definitely
think
done that too.
I don't know, some of us just aren't that long-winded.
Yeah, I also think too, like, I don't know, even when I read emails at work that other people have written, I'm like, this could have been a third of the length. Like, it's just something internal in me where
But at
it's
least
like,
it
I
wasn't a
just want,
meeting.
yeah, well, that's true. But I think that's the poet in me is just like, it's not that I just want it to be brief, but I want you to be able to read it your own way. And I feel like a lot of writers, I've done a lot of editing work, and like a lot of writers, what they want to do is tell you something and then tell you again and then make sure you've got it. And for me, that's just not something I'm interested in. I really want to say whatever I have to say. And if you can get my interpretation out of it, fine. But I don't really care. Like, as long as you're getting something, it doesn't matter if it's what I wanted you to, my intention. I don't really care.
I mean, that's really, really the awesome thing about art. But I'm thinking, you said that you love the challenge of the economy of language. And I love this as being like in the setting of like email or even like friendly correspondence. Being like, but are you as concise as you could be? Because it might be clearer if you were more concise.
Right.
Are we up for the
Yeah.
challenge?
Right. And also like is like for me when I'm writing, I'll look at my drafts and my drafts are longer than what ends up being the final piece, whether it's a poem or an essay or whatever. And it's because I find myself hunting around for the right image. Like, and I might describe something two or three ways, but really only one of those three ways is actually the clearest and sharpest and best. So the other two really can be cut. We don't need to say something is glittery and glitzy and glamorous. Like we just need one of those. And it's not just adjectives, but I think that's that's kind of the way I look at it is that I'm figuring it out as I'm writing it. I'm a verbal learner, so I'm figuring it out, but you don't need to see all that mess. That's like the stuff that we can shove under the bed.
I mean, 100%, but I also like it.
And then there are other people who have totally different aesthetics. Like I have a friend, Bob Sikora, who has an awesome podcast called the Line Break Podcast, and he's definitely more of a talky poet. And I think that's honestly, I don't mind. Like I do get bored when I read really long things, like I said. But I think it's cool to like be able to write in that super conversational style or in a way where you're just like kind of picking up um a dialect or um playing with form where you're not sure if it's a poem or not. I just don't do that. It's just not something that I've done or feel at this point that I'm capable of doing well. But I think there's a place for many types of writers. It's just that I'm not. This is me. These are my pet peeves. Laid bare, I guess I'll say.
No, I don't think I think your point was clear. I don't think anybody's going to be out here thinking like I don't know, that you hate long-winded people or something. But you did have me thinking about, and I had to look it up, and I'm really glad that I found it. The Quiet World by Jeffrey McDaniel, um, which is a poem in which the uh let's how do I say this? The content of the poem, rather than the point or whatever, um, is about folks who are allotted a limited number of words that they can use per day. So they have to be really selective about when
Interesting.
and where and what they say.
Interesting.
Uh, so I had to look that up because it felt relevant.
Yeah.
But I can move on to other things that I am capable. Um, mm, mm, mm. So my notes that I've been taking while you've been talking are more interesting than the questions I already wrote. We'll get back though.
That's
Um,
okay.
so I want to, and I know the answer to this, but I want to talk about it. Um, the poems from The Canopy, which came out in
Yes.
2012.
Yes.
Um, where else maybe have The Canopy is the MWC Press chapbook. Where maybe have these poems seen life since then?
So a lot of these poems, most of these poems were also in my debut full-length collection, which was published with Sundress Publications, Confluence. And Confluence was published in 2015, I think. Um, but for me, and then a lot of these poems in the Canopy were written while I was in graduate school at George Mason, starting in 2007. Oh my God, we're going back. Um, but I guess this kind of highlights a point where that I always seem to talk about on these interviews, which is that I take a very long time to write things and publish them, and then they, see the light of day. And honestly, with the amount of work that I write, which is not that much, what I do is I am a firm believer in the recycling of things. So like if I have something in a chapbook, it's going in the it's going in the full length collection. These other two books I've published since then, almost every poem has been published in a journal just because it took 10 years plus 10 years to write and publish them. So they saw light somewhere else. But the Canopy was really the thing that for me, I was sort of at a point, like I went to grad school. Some of these poems, when they were published in the Canopy, were 5 years old. Like they had already been around for 5 years. And then when they got published in Confluence, they were 10 years old. And I was still at that point like 29, so I like the it was crazy how long of lives the poems lived, and still do. Like there are poems in the Canopy that I still read at readings now, like Le Parc de Suicide, which is a poem that now has been renamed to Island Park. And I think of somebody else who maybe is I don't know, like a controversial figure, Sharon Olds, right? If you look at Sharon Olds' books and then look at like her collected or selected, like the poems are edited from when they first got published in a full-length collection to then when they went to the collected. And I feel like I'm not so much like that, as like I try not to be like that, but the poems have lived such long lives that some of them have still changed and evolved after they were published. So yes.
I mean, that's pretty normal. And I think worth saying so. I think there's just a lot of folks in the world who I don't know, are less experienced in the field or something. Um to that effect where, it's often, I would say it's at least medium preferred that some of your work has been published in advance of putting out any collection. Um, but then of course, like if it has seen some success, why not why not add to its accessibility?
And I think I'm the type of poet too that I really do not even I said this on a reading like I think 2 weeks ago, and the host, it was a conversational style reading, but the host was shocked that this book, IL 228, which is a book about the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, going to games with my dad and listening to baseball on the radio, it feels very much like a project book. Like poets talk about, like, I had this idea for a project, and now I'm writing these poems to fit into this project box. Even this book, like, I did not write it that way. And I don't really write any poems that way, where I'm like, I have this project in mind and I need to like write these poems to like link everything together. And I know not all project books really work that way, but like for me, I'm writing poems, and I did think of these as baseball poems. Like I had that, but that was it. Like I wasn't like, this book is going to be on these themes or whatever. It's like, no, we're going to have a Word doc. It's just going to have baseball poems in it. And I was just writing them, and I'm writing them until sort of I felt like we're kind of done here, or we've reached a natural stopping point, and then putting the book together. But with something like The Canopy or Confluence or Diorama, it was very similar. where like the themes might not seem so stark, like we're writing about a baseball team, like we're writing about nature, we're writing about love, we're writing about whatever, we're writing about the Midwest. That's a big theme in my work, shocker. But like all of these things, like we're writing about all these things, we've kind of reached the natural conclusion of that thought. Okay, let's see what we have in this group of 60 poems and how they might fit together. And then for me, because I don't write that much and I'm not super prolific, unfortunately, I'm the person who is going to shoehorn them in and just make it work. Like other people are blessed, I think, to have 100 poems to choose from for like a book that's going to be 60 pages, and that's probably never going to be me. So I'm always looking to really creatively sort them together to make it um
I've been
script.
I love that you brought this up because this is sort of a pet preoccupation of mine right now. Um, I just read a book about it and I'm working on a manuscript, so that's why. The ordering of the poetry collection, and I'll do my um I'll do the credit. The book is called Marbles on the Floor. I can't remember both of the editors' names. One of them is Sarah Giragosian. The other person's first name, I think, is Virginia. Anyway, it's a collection of essays on how to order a collection, and some of them are so very much the about the project book, and most of it is like, well, it's a little bit ineffable, but here are things to look at. And the project people, the project book people, um, certainly aren't like none of them are like, I will only ever write a project book, but it seems so much more straightforward when you're like, here's my concept album.
Mhm. And I do think too, like I have done residencies with fiction writers or even visual artists who are like, this is the plan. Like, and today I really need to knock out this scene, or I need to knock out these two small oil studies that are going to go in the show this way or that way. And for me, like, I find that very limiting just for myself. That would be difficult for me. Also, I find deadlines very difficult. Like, I don't like deadlines, where I know a lot of writers really do really well with deadlines.
I was gonna say I don't like them, but I need them.
Right. And I really don't want them. Like, I don't want them. I don't like it. But which is I struggled in grad school that way, where they were like, write a poem this week in this form, and I was like, no, no, I'm gonna find like something old and just bring it in because I can't I can't do that. But
I think that's the
but
same too. Not like necessarily how like some people are with prompts, but when it's like specific like that, when it's formal, I think a lot of people
yeah,
are like all or nothing. Like that constraint is what they need. Or
yeah.
you tell me about this constraint and now I am unable to do it.
But I do find that things I impose myself, I really like. No
Yeah,
surprise there. That's I think most
I know
writers.
me so well.
Right, right. So like I work in a lot of nonce forms. For I work in like neo-formalism, but it's like usually a form I've imposed myself, and I really like working through and discovering those sorts of forms and limitations. But like I still don't like writing pantoums or a villanelle. Like I don't enjoy that.
Do those
So
feel too like, for lack of a better word, formulaic to you?
I feel like it's just slightly too stifling. Like it's like, and probably what I should do is just to break more rules with it, which is how I think formalists in 2026 are probably thriving, like at least the few that I know. But for me, I'm like, I really all these rules, I don't want to do them all. Like, can I do like 3 out of 5? You know? And then I'm like, well, if I'm doing that, why don't I just make up my own form? Like, so that's kind of where I'm at.
I did not know I was muted. I apologize for asking you this. I do have the internet, but I like to make sure I check on jargon. Can you define neoformalism for us?
Oh God. Good
I have the
thing
internet. It's okay.
this video is probably not going to go viral because I'll probably butcher this. I mean, I hope it does, but I do. For me, neoformalism is just like I'm just talking about poets who are writing in received forms today, right? And whatever that means. Like if you consider yourself a poet who's writing in form, and I don't mean form just like not like me, who's I'm writing in some meter and some nonce forms, but they might even be undetectable to you. Like if you're writing villanelles and you're writing Shakespearean sonnets and things like that, like, and you're doing it in 2026, I guess I would call you a neoformalist.
For what it's worth, that is also what poets.org says.
Okay, great. I'm glad that education didn't go to waste. Hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean it's um I do this I do this all the time where I'm like, I'm going to talk about a thing and that word means this. And I'm just trying to be as accessible as possible.
I feel like
I
I'm on
think
a British crime show where they're like, for the sake of the tape, can you please
yeah,
define?
for I feel like I talk about form and structure interchangeably a lot, and I think that most of the time that's not a fair thing to do, and then it goes places.
They definitely relate though.
Yeah, oh, thank you. I agree.
Mm.
Um so this is actually that was really great, although I got us a little bit off track. Um Going back to because I want to talk about the baseball poems. Um Maybe we should I'll make a note of that. So you were just generally writing poems about baseball, um, about your experience, about your life as it related to the Cubs. Um, and because of that, you knew that it was something that you were able to put together thematically as a collection, right? Um, what how did you I wrote baseball poem book, by the way. That was my note for this question. Um,
Very good.
like how did you get this out there? And are there a lot of are there a lot of other books vying for that baseball poetry prize?
Yeah, no, that was a lot of people have said things like that's not a real award. And I'm like, well, to me, it was a huge honor. You'd be surprised at how many, like, baseball is the number one sport, at least in the US, that is written about by poets, which
Oh
again,
yeah, no, this prize
this is
existing does not surprise me. But keep
it's
going.
a, it's still, kind of a Venn diagram, right? Of like you've got your baseball fans and then you've got your poets. And then there's that just like little section, it feels like, where they might be both, which is what prevented this book, I think, from getting published for a very long time. But when you find those people who are either baseball fans and poets or baseball fans and poetry readers, they are very loud, they're very proud, and there are a lot of them. Like there's a lot more people writing poetry about baseball than are writing about the NFL. Or like basketball might be a close second in the US.
I'm
But
glad you said
there
that. I was like,
there
I know I've read basketball poems.
yes. But the thing is even there are magazines that are sports focused literary magazines who will have contests that say we're having a contest, but it can't be baseball because we're getting way too many baseball submissions. So Sport Literate has a contest like that. They call it anything but baseball. And so that just shows you there are a lot of people out there writing about it. For me, though, finding the right publisher was really difficult because you had to find the editor and the publisher who who was publishing poetry, but also could even. I kind of feel like the book is one where you don't need to get all the references. I mean, this is poetry in general. Like if you're writing a book about the history of Marie Antoinette, like you don't need to get all the references if it's poetry and you could still enjoy it. But it was tough, right? I would encounter editors who would send me nice notes and say, "I just don't think we can make money with this." And those were more of the sports publishers. And it's like,
Oh, okay. I
yeah,
was like, I feel like that'd be you've got an audience right there.
yeah, like, but if you're publishing mostly nonfiction books about sports, I get
Right.
it. A poetry book is not going to be your number one seller. But then also the poetry presses were like, I just don't see our main audience being interested in this. The surprise, and I will brag about this too, is this book has sold better than anything else I've ever published. It's sold really, really well. I think it's done really well for the publisher, and it's probably the number one reason why they published another one of my books. Because there are baseball fans out there that want this, and there are lots of baseball players who actually have written books of poetry. I mean, there is a market. There are even conferences um, surrounding baseball literature like that happen every year. So, yeah, I mean, it took a long time to find the right person, but I'm really glad I did.
And stuff like this too is like I see this is like that this is the intersection of our interests so we can connect over it. Like
Yeah.
I love writing and you love baseball and let's like share an experience together. I see that as like a really, I don't know, obvious meeting point for a lot of people and their like family members.
I wrote an essay for AWP's The Writer's Chronicle about this with this book, where it was like people would come to the readings and they'd be like, I don't like poetry, but I love baseball and that's why I'm here. And they were like, this is the first book of poetry I've ever read. Or this is the first book I've read since high school. Like, period, book. And I'm like, that's crazy.
That's
Like,
so cool. I mean,
but it's awesome.
what an honor.
It is an honor, yeah. And then there were people there who are like my friends from the poetry world who are like, I don't like baseball. Like, I really don't like baseball, but I enjoyed listening to you read from that book. Or I'm going to buy a copy of that book because I found the images interesting or whatever. And that meant a lot too. It really felt like I really kind of felt like a crossover artist. So it was a lot of fun.
I love that. I think that's my goal that I didn't realize I had was to appeal to the person who to the non-reader or
Yeah.
whatever it is they see themselves as being.
Like there were sports bros coming to these events and being like, I read this all in one sitting. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like,
It
I
took
love
me 10 years.
it. No, but I'm like, I know you didn't read it the way a poet would read it, but I don't care. I could give a fuck. Like, oops, probably shouldn't have said that.
You're fine.
But but I loved hearing that. So
I love that. And thank you for talking about it. I was going to say I'm sure that you get this question a lot and the first thing you said is like that's not a real award, which it is. Um but I think that it's really interesting and I think it's worth having more stuff like this in the world where I don't know, like our lives are not so segregated like that. Why would our entertainment be, right? I'm not going to say like I've never watched a sports show before and I really love Ted Lasso. Like, it's not I'm not separating TV from sports because I don't like sports. I want I want a good half hour on the couch. I don't know.
yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think that too, um, I wrote this book, like it's amazing. Like I think the poetry world compared to the sports writing world does an amazing job of, and poetry world has its faults. I'm not here to just praise everything, but like the inclusion of diverse voices in the poetry world is so far ahead of the sports writing world. I write columns for sports magazines as well and websites that are like essays. They're artsy. They're on the artsy side, but I do that for pay as a freelancer. And just being a white woman is like it's like a huge diversity green flag for them. They're like, oh, we have a white woman. And it's like, that would not be the case. Like, if it was a truly diverse workforce, like, that wouldn't be the case. So, but I think for me, like, I was writing this book and publishing this book for a lot of the people who felt like they could not write about sports, even like Annie Dillard, right? Good example, or Marianne Moore. they were huge baseball fans, but they were not bringing that into their literature in a like, maybe a reference here or there, right? But not in a deep way. They weren't writing whole books about it, but they were huge baseball fans. So I felt like, okay, we've now reached this point in the poetry world where we're 20 years, 30 years into this writing about pop culture thing. If somebody can write a whole book about Barbie, if somebody can write, who start a literary magazine about Taco Bell, this is something that I can do. And I can still be taken seriously.
Yeah, and that was really what I was trying to say when I just kept sports on my mind for some reason about like separating these realms and what we're allowed to do. Because it doesn't make any sense that we would do that, right?
Mhm.
Like we have varied interests. We don't exist in columns.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for making that happen. Um, I very much want to talk about diorama. Um, if you are up for that, I know that's your newest one. I want to give it a little shine.
Fun.
Um, I'm now worried that I got the name wrong.
No, diorama.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. Um, Now that does have some strong through lines, right?
Mhm.
Thematically. And I actually, if you have it nearby, I would love to show that cover. I think it is so gorgeous. Oh, you have to talk to see it.
Oh, I'm talking. Here's the book cover.
Thank you. Yeah, I forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me how that one happened.
So I've been just for the layman among us and blame it maybe on the sports writing, but I've been like the way I've been marketing it, or I was marketing it at the beginning, and it's such a bad way of marketing it, is like it's Confluence too. But I think what you're saying about the through lines and themes, it has some very similar through lines and themes to Confluence. Like, whereas I would say IL 228, I'm very unabashed about it basically being like poets don't like to say like this is autobiographical. Like we're very weird about that. We're like this is the speaker and this is the poet. With IL 228, it is one and the same. Like it is a nonfiction book. With diorama, or for the most part, with diorama and confluence, there are definitely more of imaginings. There's some, reality that's recycled into new images, things like that. But a lot of the themes are very similar. Confluence kind of traces, there's sort of a love story in there. There's this really strong Midwestern theme of seasons and what, it is like to live in the Midwest. And I think there's even like you could definitely read it in a way where it's a little bit like defensive about how people treat the Midwest in literature. Blame it on being on the East Coast when I wrote a lot of it. Um, and then Diorama kind of picks up on some of those things, but the overlayer on Diorama that's different, or maybe it's just like a tiny little thread in Confluence, but it grows and becomes a huge parachute in Diorama is um, I really wanted to write a book about my influences, my poetic mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles and all these things. And I wanted to write a book where I wasn't just writing, how do I want to say this? I wasn't writing exercises or like writing from a prompt where I was like reading this Elizabeth Bishop poem and then writing my take on it. But I wanted to incorporate their voices, whether it was like lines from their poems or titles or parts of their biography, even into my own poems that were truly still mine. It's a weird little distinction, but it's there. And it's the first book I ever wrote where I felt like I really needed endnotes, but the endnotes kind of read almost like a biography or a reading list of all of my favorite poets, which I love. It feels like an homage. And that's kind of where the name comes from. Diorama is the idea of I'm making something that is different than the original. Like this front hallway on the cover is from the Thorne Miniature Rooms at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it is a diorama. And making a diorama is different than actually building a house, right? It
I
takes
have
different
spent
skills. It takes different tools. And so I felt like for my book, it's there's an homage there, but it really is my own work. It takes different skills and tools to then to create the source texts. So that's sort of how that's sort of what I wanted to do with the book.
I have spent whole days, not like a lot of them, but like if I go into that um gallery,
Yes.
I can't leave it. Um, yeah, that's not what I meant to say. Um, I love that it's almost like the way that you describe it, and the reason that I think that it's worth, I don't know, talking about, um, is because it's sort of like the nesting doll or the hermit crab of our literary lineage. It's going to be my phrase today.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have that. Actually, I think just an aside, I'll say like that is a lot of people's favorite gallery at the Art Institute that have told me that. I think there a lot of people have just bought this book because of the cover. Like I'll be signing it and they're like, I'm buying it because I love the cover. And I'm like, fine, whatever. That's great. But um and I love that people have that connection with that gallery. I also think that this is another thing. Like, I guess I'm really into this idea in my poetry of like giving myself permission to do things that people have frowned upon in the past. So,
Mm.
like, that was definitely the case with the baseball book, but also because that book is a lot about nostalgia and sentimentality in a way that people tell poets not to do. And this book is about these influences, which, again, I feel like a lot of people over the course of my poetry education told me don't do this. Like, don't bring in, unless you're doing it in certain acceptable ways, like do not just be throwing around these other poets' names or using their lines or whatever. Like, if you're not doing it in a specific poetic form, or if you're not doing it like, and of course, I do believe in giving all of those people credit, which I did in the book. But if you're not doing it in a very specific way, you need to be writing your own work and your own work only. So for me, I think this book also felt like a big permission slip to just say, I don't care. Like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to have this book published and it's going to be fine. So
I think that's so big. I feel like, especially with artists, although maybe that's especially not with artists. I don't know that the there's some permission that needs to be given, some, just for whatever reason. And I think
yeah,
that's so big and must, I don't know. I feel like I would be particularly proud of that project in that case.
we're all like, or at least for me, I think there's this syndrome. There's like the good girl syndrome, right? And I'm still very much, I still have that problem. But so for me, these are like my little rebellions, I guess.
I'll take it. I have, well, apparently enough questions to do this again. If you ever want to come back, you've got that invite, but I will be mindful of time. I know you brought a prompt for us.
Yes,
So folks who are hanging out with us, thanks for hanging out with us. Please give yourself 5, 10 minutes, whatever it is you can afford to try and get something out based on what Sandra's going to give us. Go
sure.
ahead.
Okay, we're going with the prompt. Okay, so I think one prompt that I've used in I teach a workshop on sound mapping, which is a technique I used in Confluence, about how to kind of repeat and add and subtract sounds throughout poems. And one of the prompts that I usually give at the end of that workshop is to ask folks to go into a different space than where they usually write. I'm a big en plein air writer. I like to write in weird places. Go somewhere maybe a little, it doesn't have to be that uncomfortable. If you're used to writing at the desk and you don't want to go outside, it could be the kitchen, it could be the couch. And listen for a sound. It could be in your house, it could be cars passing by, it could be a rustle of wind, it could be a clock. Listen for sounds and kind of listen for a while. Listen, give yourself a minute or two. It could be the fridge humming, and you might start to hear some patterns. Or even if you don't hear some patterns, you might start to hear some sounds that equate with letters, you know. And start writing based on that sound. So whatever that, it could even just be you walking and the rhythm of you walking. You can do it with rhythms. It doesn't have to necessarily be like, oh, I hear a whoosh of wind, so I'm starting with an S. But start writing based on that sound. And if you need some extra help, you can like use a source text, like bring a book and read a poem or two or whatever, and just see what you can come up with. And stop and listen and kind of keep listening for the sounds and go back to it and just see what you can come up with based on the sounds. And if there's an interjecting sound and you want to include that, you can too. There might be more to this that I'm forgetting, but I think that'll get you off to a good start.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, if you have more, that feels like a big prompt. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Thanks, folks, for hanging out with us. And as always, please write more light into your life.